Hello, Sooner Nation, OU Insider subscribers, Coach Bryan Clinton enthusiasts or fanatics. I go back and I say them both. Okies, as if you're watching the YouTube, you can see Bryan has an Okie hat on. It looks great. BYU, people who know about BYU, any college football fans, people who are confused about the Big 12 tiebreaker scenarios, that probably means everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Oklahoma Drill podcast, fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. My name is Jesse Crittenden, and I am, of course, joined by my co-host, Mr. Coach Sir Bryan Clinton. Bryan, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm ready to hit the road. Ready to get this get the wheels. Well, you're ready to get the wheels up. I'm ready to get the wheels on the pavement and get moving up Provo. But
That's what for people listening. Since you don't know, so me and our colleague Brandon Drum have the easy trip to Provo for the OU BYU game this weekend. We're both flying, but Bryan and our colleague Parker are driving from Oklahoma to BYU. Bryan, how long of a drive is that? Is that eternity? How long is that drive?
17 short, blissful hours.
Short and blissful. Okay. Yeah, totally. 17 hours. Well, when are you guys actually heading out?
So I will head down to the Oklahoma City area tomorrow about 6 a.m. And then when Parker gets off the radio tomorrow afternoon around 3, I think we're going to literally just pack up the car and go from that point. So it'll be a good 2-hour drive for me down to you guys. 17 hours there, 17 hours back, and then 2 hours back on Sunday night to get here before Monday. So it'll be good. It'll be fun.
Well, gotta say, I like you both. You guys are good dudes, good friends, good colleagues, but very, very glad that I will be flying and not driving with you guys. Not against you guys at all. I'm just very glad to be flying.
Yeah. No, when Parker asked if anybody wanted to take a road trip, I was like, I can't let that guy. I can't let him drive that entire way by himself. Nor is that safe, but not fun whatsoever. So
you should have, it's the grind, it's adversity, being able to overcome it. It's an important lesson for everybody, not me. I've already learned it. That's why I will not be driving to Provo. I've already learned it, but you guys still got to learn it. So, what can I say? But hey, for everybody at home, this is what we do. Well, this is what Bryan and Parker do because they're extra committed, but this is what we do to cover the University of Oklahoma football team. And Bryan, things feel a little bit more different, a little more optimistic than they did the last couple of times we've done this show. And we're going to talk about all kinds of things. We're going to talk about all the confusion about the Big 12 title race and how the conference has been confusing is the nicest way I can put it in terms of the tiebreaker scenarios. We're going to talk about BYU this weekend, but I think we really need to talk about Saturday's win over West Virginia. Oklahoma kind of controlling that game really from the beginning to a 59-20 win. I think there was a lot of angst from the fan base about that game after back-to-back losses to Kansas and Oklahoma State, but really felt like a get-right game in a lot of ways, not only big to stabilize the season, but I think really to stabilize the program. I mean, I think 3 straight losses would have felt pretty bad. I really do. But Bryan, you were on the field as you always are when we're covering these games. What stood out to you about what ended up being a pretty easy, but I don't know if it was fully expected, but a pretty easy blowout for Oklahoma?
Well, it was surprising, obviously, the outcome, winning by 39 points. I honestly felt going into this game that West Virginia, the last 3 opponents that Oklahoma's faced, just as far as a schematic, from a schematic standpoint, that they probably gave Oklahoma the biggest test. Really good offensive line, physical, play really physical defense, opportunistic defensively. West Virginia just had some pieces, and they were playing really, really good. I mean, their best football of the year to this point, coming into that game. And so it was, I know that they kind of felt like it was gut check time going into Bedlam, but this really felt like this team kind of putting their foot down and saying, no, there's, just to use the words that Drake Stoops used earlier in the week, there's still a lot to play for. And so it really looked like they did that. I will say, um, the tension was palpable in that first quarter whenever West Virginia went down and scored. The stadium, you could feel, as you said, the angst in the fan base. You could really feel that people were uncomfortable. What happened to this team is kind of what it felt like.
Well, and I think it was because that first drive was so easy. I mean, I think West Virginia only had 2 third downs and they converted them both pretty easily. I mean, yeah, I don't know how anybody wouldn't have thought, oh my God,
Yeah.
here we go again with this team, right?
It was, again, you could feel it. And then when Oklahoma, when they answered and tied the ball game up in, relatively easy fashion the other way, it was like you could tell people were like, well, what kind of game is this going to be? Is it like, this feels like an old Oklahoma game, like from a few years ago. But then the Sooners put the clamps down defensively, really started playing good, sound football. I think the emergence of Kip Lewis is not something to be understated for this defense, because with Danny Stutzman at Mike and with him playing the will, I think that's a really strong combo. I think that, you know, I still believe Jaron Kanik has a bright future here with Oklahoma, but at this point in time, those two guys combine to give you, I mean, arguably the best linebacker duo in the Big 12. If Kip Lewis continues to improve upon what we've seen from him in two games worth of real uh, opportunity, he's going to be really good. So I felt good about that, but I think the biggest thing you had to come away from in this game feeling good about was the run game. The run game was more than efficient. It was excellent. It was the best it's looked all season. And I would even say that because the run game was more effective, you saw more intermediate opportunities down the field. Now, the 0 passes behind the line of scrimmage in this game, there were 0 passes thrown behind the line of scrimmage. That is a concerted effort. That is the offensive staff, whether it be something that Brent Venables sat down and talked with them about, whatever it was, there was an effort to not do things the way that they had been doing them, to get out of this rut that they were in offensively. And I think you really saw the offense clicking on all cylinders for the first time, maybe since that Iowa State game. So it was really good. Felt really confident coming out of that game that Oklahoma truly took some steps, because I said this in our instant analysis after the game. I know that Dylan Gabriel had 8 touchdowns in this game, but this was not the sharpest performance of the year for him. Mm-hmm. He was off. And if that Dylan Gabriel shows up against Texas, Oklahoma doesn't win that football game. So that just shows you the progress that the rest of the guys around him have made in the games since then. The offensive line coming together, the running game, and then other guys filling in to try and fill the void that was left by Andrew Anthony going down. So really good performance from both sides of the ball. I was really happy with how the offense looked, though.
Well, you mentioned the defense. I mean, you're right to give up that really easy opening drive, but I think over the next 5 West Virginia possessions, they had 13 total yards, not 1 first down. I think for the defense to really settle in like that and largely limit West Virginia's offense was pretty impressive. But you're right, Bryan. I think offensively there's 4 guys who are really worth noting. And, I think that's, Nick Anderson with, 119 yards, big performance. Austin Stogner was big to see him finally get involved. 4 catches for 69 yards and a score. But I think that the 2 main things, Bryan, is you mentioned the running game there. And the first one is Gavin Sawchuk, who, coming into the season, Everybody was waiting for the breakout. They saw the Cheez-It Bowl coming into the season. It's going to be Gavin Sawchuk and Javante Barnes. Well, they both suffered injuries before the season. Both had to work through them. And when Gavin Sawchuk saw the field early in the season, he just didn't look quite that explosive. It was clear he was still trying to work through things. It's clear he's still trying to find a rhythm. But over the last couple of weeks, Bryan, he's been incredible. He's been really, really good. I mean, he had a career day against Oklahoma State, had over 110 yards. I think he averaged over 6 yards per carry. And then against West Virginia, again, 135 yards on 22 carries, 6.1 yards per carry. He looks like the starting running back. And this running back room has been really confusing all year. Obviously, Tawee Walker's still not fully healthy, but I think Gavin Sawchuk has done enough the last couple of weeks to cement himself as the starter. He's clearly the most explosive. He's really good when he's in a groove. He's really good at reading the offensive line and figuring out where the holes need to be or where they are. And, he can improvise really well. But I think this is a big deal, not only for, going through the rest of this season. I mean, he's now made, I think he's made 3 consecutive starts, or 3 or 4. I think 3.
Yes.
He's made 3 consecutive starts.
No.
Wait, did he start against UCF?
Yes,
4.
yes, because didn't he? That was the game that he had the issues with the snap, correct? Was that against UCF?
Yes.
I believe
it was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. God, that feels like that was a million years ago.
I know
it. Yes, it was. So 4 consecutive starts, but I think he's earned it. And I think this is big, not only moving forward and given the running back, the efficiency issues the running back room had through the beginning of the season, but I think it's big going through, going into the future in the SEC. I think it's pretty clear that Gavin Sawchuk, when he's running like this, needs to be getting the bulk of the running back touches, and he needs to be a big part of the offense. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the OU offense really looked as good as it has all season. And I'm going to even say that includes Arkansas State and even Iowa State, because the running back room, the Gavin Sawchuk was running the ball so well. And the other one is Drake Stoops. Can you say enough about that dude and what he's done this season? I mean, he leads this team in receiving yards, touchdowns, receptions, targets. He has 33 receptions over the last 4 weeks. He's just been incredible. He leads the Big 12, or is in the top 5 in the Big 12 in nearly every receiving category. I mean, and again, 10 catches for 164 yards and 3 touchdowns. Bryan, he was incredible.
I think he is. I'm going to come out, and this really isn't that much of a prognostication at this point. He's going to lead the Big 12 in receptions and yards and in touchdown and receiving touchdowns at the end of the regular season. I mean, I truly believe that 100%, and it's a testament to the work ethic of this kid. I mean, this is a guy that, and you can't really even call him a kid, because I mean, heck, he's been doing this for 6 years now in Norman, and so it's just really awesome to see somebody put in the work and put in, have the dedication to do this for the amount of time that he has, and really morph from a kid that was known as Bob's boy growing up. And he was around the program, and there's pictures of Bob and Carol holding he and Isaac on the field whenever they were just little, just infants. And now he's making plays on that same field. It's just really cool. And it's something that, I think Oklahoma fans aren't ever going to forget. This is a kid that, despite the name on his jersey, has made a name for himself as a playmaker. And it's that Youngstown, grit that has gotten him there. And so it's really, really awesome. I mean, it's just a great story, one that probably isn't getting enough attention nationally, but I think when it comes time for all Big 12 awards and things like that, I think that he'll finally get the recognition that he deserves.
I tweeted this Monday, I believe, since Andrew Anthony got hurt, which I want to clarify. It is not like, it's just when Andrew Anthony got hurt, that left a void in this OU offense, and somebody needed to step up. And Nick Anderson has done a lot to fill that role. But since he went down, Drake Stoops has 33 catches. I think, what he's done since Andrew Anthony went down, he's on a 12-game pace for 99 receptions for over 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns.
How many receptions does he have on the year?
62, I think. 62.
Okay. So I looked this up the other day and it stuck in my mind. He has, coming into this year, because Oklahoma hasn't updated his career stats. Coming into the year, he had 80 receptions on his career over the last 5 years and 914 yards receiving. He's gonna surpass both of those. With the bowl game and potentially a Big 12 championship game, he'll surpass those, which is incredible. I mean, that's just awesome. It goes to show you a guy taking advantage of the opportunity.
He has nearly double the catches on the season as Jalil Farouk, who's second on the team with 35. Incredible. It's insane. And I think that's the thing. I think it's all the his name and his roots and being Bob Stoops' son, all that is incredible. But I think he's I think that what he's doing on the field is almost overshooting all of that.
Yeah, it almost overshadows
it really
the fact that his last name is Stoops. Yeah, I mean,
he's just a dang good football player, and I think he's increasing his draft stock too. I mean, I think coming into the year, I don't think anybody was really looking at him as a guy. I think he's going to get drafted, man.
Absolutely,
that's how good he's been.
Yep, he is. He fits that. He fits that Wes Welker slot receiver role that we've seen in certain at certain teams really thrive. His route running has really improved over the last couple of years, and he has just enough twitch where he's difficult to cover in open space. And he always the knack to find the football finding you all the time. That's not just a mistake. He's just really good at finding weak spots in the zone, and that football IQ that he's gathered over the years has really showed up this year.
It has. And look, that development of him and what he's done the last few weeks, what Gavin has done, I think cementing himself as OU's running back or starting running back, that bodes well moving forward, because as we've seen the last few days, what we saw last weekend, this Big 12 title race is pretty crazy. It really is. So let's dive into everything that's happened the last couple of days with these tiebreaker scenarios. But before we do that, let's hear a word from our sponsors.
This episode of the Oklahoma Drill Podcast is sponsored in part by Manscaped. Ready to spice up your Thanksgiving? As we dive headfirst into mountains of mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce, let's talk about the unsung hero of the holiday season, the Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. And fellas, I just started using the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. It is truly life-changing. You'll never go back to your old trimmers. So don't let your poor grooming be the topic of the dinner conversation this year. With the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, you'll be the talk of the table. It's waterproof, so you can groom wet or dry, and let's face it, we all want to look our best before carving that bird. Plus, the LED spotlight ensures you don't miss a spot, even in low-light situations. And speaking of carving, the dual skin-safe blade heads are your best teammates. The trimmer blade takes care of business, while the foil blade gives you an irresistibly sleek finish, like a winning touchdown at your Thanksgiving table. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code OUinsider at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code OUinsider. Be thankful this holiday season for the best gift of all from Manscaped. Your balls will thank you.
So, Bryan, as we mentioned and kind of touched on, when we started this episode, anybody that follows OU football, anybody that follows college football, anybody that follows Big 12 football has seen the confusion with these tiebreaker scenarios the last couple of weeks. But for anybody that hasn't, this is where things sit right now in the Big 12. This is how chaotic things are. So Texas is first in the conference with a 6-1 record. At second place, there's a 4-way tie between Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Iowa State, and Kansas State, all at 5-2. But Iowa State plays both Texas and Kansas State. So the scenario that has been talked about a lot is, could Oklahoma State, and Kansas State all win out and finish with a 7-2 record and tied for second, assuming Texas wins out? Well, according to the tiebreakers that are written on the Big 12's website, Bryan, the way you break a 3-way tie is you go head to head. But if not every team has played each other, you then go to the record against the next highest placed common opponent in the standings. Assuming Kansas State won out and Oklahoma State and Oklahoma won out, even though Oklahoma State beat both Oklahoma and Kansas State, since Oklahoma and Kansas State don't play each other, according to that next tiebreaker, Kansas State would be the one to advance to Texas or to Arlington and face Texas in the Big 12 title game. But the Big 12 has clarified in quotes, that how the rule is supposed to be interpreted, I guess is the best way I can say it, is that if there's a three-way tie between teams who have not played each or where all three teams have not played each other, then whichever team has beaten the other two teams advances, which would be Oklahoma State. So if that three-way tie happens, it will be Oklahoma State, not Kansas State. And I think the confusing thing about this is, look, no one's arguing that Oklahoma State wouldn't deserve to get through. That is absolutely the truth. Yep. Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma and Kansas State. That should absolutely factor in. So this specific scenario and clarification doesn't really impact Oklahoma. But Bryan, that is not what the tiebreaker rules say. They were adamant. I emailed them a couple of days ago about these tiebreakers. This is the email they sent back to me and several other reporters. And they specifically said that this is not a change. This is not a change from the existing tiebreaker rules. This is going with the rules that were agreed upon before the season. Bryan, unless I can't read, unless my reading comprehension isn't good, which I'm not saying I have the best reading comprehension, Bryan, this doesn't seem like a clarification to me. This seems like a change. Am I wrong?
So, to me, a clarification would be you are explaining something that is already written into the tiebreaker scenarios or written into the procedures or policies that you have to follow. That in no way, shape, or form is found anywhere in the multi-team tiebreaker procedures. The number one on the policies list there on multi-team ties says head to head, and then in parentheses, best cumulative win percentage in games among the tied teams. Period. If not, comma. That comma shouldn't be there.
Yeah, it's a bad comma.
Yes.
Bad comma.
It should read, if not every tied team has played each other, go to step 2. That's how it should read. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe, and I'll even preface by saying this: Oklahoma isn't the team that got screwed in this scenario. It's Kansas State.
It's Kansas State.
And so I don't believe for a second that the Big 12 is truly trying to keep Oklahoma or Texas out of the Big 12 championship. That's not what's happening. The problem is you should not have come into the season, first of all, with this kind of issue for a multi-team tie, given how competitive this league is year in and year out. But to make a quote-unquote change, we're just going to call it a clarification to clarify and put an addendum into the policies is something that should happen post-season. You should fix that between seasons. So not only was the Big 12 wrong by coming into the year with these issues, they doubled down and were wrong again by making some sort of change in the middle of the year. And it's just a bad look for the conference. I mean, I understand why you felt the need to do that. If you're, rules official, whatever, but it's just not a good look. No, there's no way about it. It's not a good look. And Kansas State fans have every right to be upset. You have every right to be upset because under the rules last week, you were in great position to make a Big 12 title game. And now, I mean, it's really, you're up against it a little bit. You want to know how crazy this tiebreaker scenario stuff is? Hold on here. I'm going to break the fourth wall here for a
second. Okay. For people who are not watching on video, Bryan he's getting a huge whiteboard that looks like the It's Always Sunny meme where Charlie's pointing at everything on the wall.
You see all of the itty bitty writings here. This is what it took for me to break down how these tiebreaker scenarios could change whenever they made this new rule. So there's like all these different wins and losses and tiebreaker scenarios over here, and then the standings and all that. But it just for me to understand it enough to speak on it, covering for Heartland and obviously for OU Insider, it's just too much. Like, I mean, it should not be this complicated. And so for the Big 12's sake, I honestly just hope that something happens where that three-way tie never happens, because if it does and Oklahoma State moves on and Kansas State's left behind, it's going to be so bad.
Both things can be true. This is technically the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Oklahoma State's wins against Kansas State and Oklahoma should absolutely be honored.
Yep.
This is technically not the right thing to do. This is the right logic. It is not the right thing to do. And what I told Parker is what I told him was, it's clear to me because the last 10 years of Big 12 football, there's 10 teams, everybody plays each other. That makes the tiebreakers a lot simpler.
Super easy.
Yeah, but then they added 4 teams, and for this year only, there's a 14-team conference. And to me, it's clear that they thought about the possibility of teams, of more than 2 teams being tied that hadn't all played each other. What they had not thought about was that it was possible that even if all 3 teams hadn't played each other, that one would have played both and beat them both.
Correct.
They had not factored in that scenario. And to me, it's, again, if you're a Sooner fan, this, not that it doesn't affect you, it mostly doesn't affect you, or at least in this scenario with Kansas State, Oklahoma State, it doesn't really affect you that much. But to me, this is more of a, it's not only making this change, and it is a change, but to then double down and say this is not a change.
Yeah.
It's a weird look. And I agree with you. I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's incompetency.
Yeah.
That's what I think it is. And that's why, if you're a Kansas State fan, telling me that this is probably the right logic, most can agree with that. But to me, if you tell me that doesn't help me feel any better.
No.
To me, that means, all of a sudden now I've got my whole thought process on the next 2 weeks of college football or Big 12 football completely changes. It's completely different.
Yeah, there's no reason why you should have gone through 10 games, thinking, or not even 10 games. We're not thinking about tiebreaker scenarios in the non-conference, but there's no reason why for 2 full weeks where Kansas State's made their way back into this race and really become a player in it, that you should be thinking this is what could potentially happen. And now that's been flipped on its head. And you don't have there. If this is the right logic, then why was it not used? Why was this not the verbiage used in August before the season started? That's that's really, again, what you just said. The incompetence is what is really the best way of putting it. They didn't look at every available angle, and whether that's, hey, we only have 14 teams for 1 year, this will do. What's the worst that could happen? I really hope that that's not the conversation that happened. But with all the things that are changing in this league, some things obviously get overlooked, and this was one of them.
Well, and to me, I think to kind of put a bow on it, to me, I think it's again stating that I almost would have respected the Big 12 more if, instead of saying this isn't a change, if they had come out and said, look, we screwed up.
Yeah.
This is our fault. This is a weird year for the conference. And it is. Look, if you're the Big 12, this is weird. You went from 16 years of 12 teams and 2 16 divisions. Mm-hmm. Then you had to go to a round robin 10-team format. Now for 1 year, you have 14 teams, and then you're losing 2 and bringing in a bunch more teams. This is weird. Right. I'm not saying I would have respected it. I'm not even trying to justify it. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying I would have almost respected it more if they said, we screwed up. We did not plan for this contingency where one team had beaten both in a 3-team scenario where not everybody played each other. Yeah. But to double down and say this isn't a change, it's a change. There's no other way to 100%. Say it.
Yeah, there's not. You're lying to yourself if you don't believe that that's a change. And I would have respected them totally if they would have said, yeah, we messed up on that, but that's what it says. And that's how we started the year under these.
Yeah, you're right.
We started the year under this, and this is how we have to finish it. We'll change it going in 2024. But the way that they handled it was just wrong. And, a quick note on all of this, the sport is going away from divisions. We're seeing divisions being wiped away everywhere. The Pac-12 doesn't have divisions this year. This is one of those unforeseen consequences of not having divisions, because had Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Kansas State all been in the same division like they were in the old Big 12, Oklahoma State would have had it's already written in there. They would have had the tiebreaker because they would have had those division wins over Oklahoma and Kansas State. Therefore, they would have been the team at the top going in, recognizing or being the team that represents the North in that, in the old Big 12. But this is just something I don't think that this is going to be the last time it's an issue. But this feels like 2014 all over again with Baylor and TCU. It feels like there was oversight on how the champion was going to be decided, and it's a bad look.
Well, I'll say you're right. I should have specified that this should have been not a we screwed up, let's change it. It should have been we screwed up, and look, Oklahoma State, assuming they went out, has Oklahoma State has every right to be upset if they went out and still don't get in, despite the wins against Oklahoma State or against Oklahoma and Kansas State. But we will fix this. This is an oversight. That I think and then if you're an Oklahoma State fan, it's frustration that the Big 12 didn't see this earlier, not
Correct.
A Kansas State fan who's potentially going to be upset because of this change, which I really have never heard of something like this before. But also in a joking, but not kind of joking way, I said when the Big 12 schedule was released this year that it was a travesty to not have Oklahoma and Kansas State play each other this year. It was. And I know there's a lot that goes into the schedule making process, but we could have avoided all of this if Oklahoma and Kansas State played each other, because every time they play each other, it's a great game.
Oh, I said the same thing about Oklahoma State and Texas.
Yeah, they should. Oklahoma State and Texas should play. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, if those would have happened, then we wouldn't really have this issue. But again, if Oklahoma State wouldn't have got its doors blown off last week, we wouldn't be having this conversation anyways. So
that's the lead into all of this. And look, it's not silly to be upset or confused or frustrated or disappointed, regardless of where you sit on all of this. You probably feel a little bit more if you're a Kansas State or Oklahoma State fan. The reality is we've still got 2 weeks of Big 12 football, and we have seen every week in this conference that things do not work out like you thought they would. Who in the heck would have ever thought Oklahoma State would go down to UCF and get beat by 42?
Not me.
You could have given me a million scenarios, and that would have been the last one I bet on.
Yeah.
They scored 3 points. They just beat Oklahoma. They beat Kansas State.
Yeah.
And
on top of that, they're playing. This is the worst, I believe, the worst Power 5 rushing defense, the worst in the Big 12. And I think they were like 123rd or 122nd nationally. And Ollie Gordon had 25 yards on 12 carries. I know that he was hurt for a portion of the game, but he came back in. You held Ollie Gordon to 25 yards. It was a weird game.
Well, and I'm not saying, oh my God, UCF's so horrible. It's not about that. UCF has some decent players on both sides of the ball. They do. But for Oklahoma State, you're now completely in the driver's seat, and to lose to a team that has good players but should not be beating you by 42 points. For that to happen, we talk about the Oklahoma letdown after the Texas win. This letdown by Oklahoma State drastically overshadows any of OU's losses or even the close win over UCF. This is nowhere close. But this is when it comes to, I think it's okay to be frustrated or confused about all of this that's happened the last couple of days, but so much could change. Look, what if Iowa State beats Texas? What if Iowa State beats Kansas State? What if Kansas beats Kansas State? Iowa State is still viable depending on some other things happening here. And look, all of this really doesn't matter for Oklahoma if they don't win out. That's really what this comes down to. And Brent Venables kind of talked about it on Tuesday. But for Oklahoma, like I said, all this impacts them a little bit, but nothing changes for them. To have a chance at the Big 12 title game, they've got to win out. And you're probably now rooting against Texas and probably Oklahoma State for good measure.
Yep.
While you win out, that's probably what you're looking at. So there's also been a lot of discussion about what does Oklahoma need. You probably need a Texas loss or an Oklahoma State loss. I believe that's what you need.
Yes, you need Oklahoma State to lose a game. You need Iowa State. Iowa State to beat Texas would be the best outcome for Oklahoma, I believe. They could lose to Texas Tech and Oklahoma get in, and I think that you would face I think that you would face Texas still in that scenario. But if Iowa State was to win and beat Oklahoma, and then everything else it holds pat there, I believe it's OU OSU in the Big 12 championship.
Well, and this could end in a 4-way tie between Texas, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State. Even if Texas drops a game, right?
Or if Iowa State beats Texas and then turns around and beats Kansas State, it could be a 4-way tie with those teams and Kansas State being on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I mean, this is incredibly close. This is, I mean, what more could you ask for? I mean, I know it's been frustrating for some fan bases, but as far as crowning a champion, what more could you ask for as far as a race goes than what we've got here last 2 weeks in Big 12 play for Oklahoma and for Texas? I mean, this is as fun as it gets. So you've got 5 teams feeling like they've got a legitimate shot at a Big 12 crown, and we're headed into week 12. I mean, it just doesn't get any more fun than that.
Yeah, right. And while I think the possible scenarios have been tweaked a little bit for Oklahoma to get there, like I said, nothing changes about them needing to win out.
Correct.
That nothing changes. And that starts this weekend at BYU, a place Oklahoma has never played, I believe. And
correct.
This will be a 10 a.m. local kick, or specifically a 10:07 local kick, 11:07 local time. This is going to be the earliest kickoff in the history of Oklahoma football, which is not fun for us in the media or probably fans either. But this is an incredibly early kickoff. And look, BYU is a new place for everybody, basically everybody on that roster, for the coaching staff to go to Provo. It's a new place. Also, the altitude is a real thing. It's different there. Plus BYU is a really passionate fan base, and it's one of the most heralded college football environments there is. But this is a game Oklahoma's heavily favored, and that's because BYU is 5-5 overall. They're 2-5 in the conference. They've lost, I believe, 3 straight, and they have not scored their point totals in their last 3 games, 6, 7, and 13. Our offense has just been rough. Now I know they've had some injuries, but offense has just been rough. Defense has been rough. They've given up 35, 37, and 45 points during this 3-game skid. Look, you can't overlook anybody. Look, Oklahoma struggled against a Cincinnati team that has struggled in Big 12 play this year on the road. They barely beat UCF. They lost to Kansas, Oklahoma State. You can't take anything for granted. But Bryan, I mean, is this a game Oklahoma, assuming they play like they did against West Virginia, is this a game even on the road they should be able to handle pretty easily?
If the Oklahoma team that came into Norman and played West Virginia last weekend shows up in Provo, this game will be decided by north of 40 points. I mean, this just is not a good. They're just not playing good football right now. BYU is one of the proudest football traditions in the country outside of your traditional blue bloods. BYU has done it. They've got just really strong ties with fantastic quarterback play over the years. Long time ago, I believe it was Steve Young and McMahon. I'm drawing a blank on a couple of the other guys that they've had come out of there, but obviously really, really good football program up there. And look, you started off the season 5-2, and they've been dying for that bowl game, that bowl bid, that 6th win for several weeks now. You're at 5-5, and now, you lose here, you're 5-6, and you've got one more chance at it, and you've got to go to Stillwater and try and beat Oklahoma State next weekend. So I think the motivation factor is going to be there. Obviously, this is a game that BYU fans have had circled for, since the schedule came out. When Oklahoma came to BYU, everybody had that one circled. This is a team that BYU's played twice. They've beat them twice. They're 2-0 all time against the Sooners. I'm sure there's going to be signs of all sorts up there, but this is just a game that it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for both teams. So I think both teams will come into this fairly well prepared. But I mean, if both teams play at 90% of their capacity, Oklahoma wins this game going away. I mean, they really should. They should not struggle in this game.
Look, I mean, to that point, Bryan, I agree with you. Look, BYU is dead last in the Big 12 in points per game at 21.9. They're 12th in the conference in defense, at 28.7 points per game allowed. They're 12th in the conference in rushing defense. They're dead last in the conference in rushing offense. They're 13th in the conference in passing offense. Their passing defense has actually been kind of middle of the road, but I think it's because their rushing defense is so bad.
Correct.
I mean, there's just going to be so many avenues for this Oklahoma team to attack BYU. So I think when you're thinking about not only for this game, but also in terms of remaining viable in the Big 12 race and trying to get to that title game and thinking about continuing to build the program and all that stuff, So for this game and beyond, what are you looking for most on either side of the ball for Oklahoma? What are you going to be watching or paying attention to more than anything else?
So Oklahoma has struggled on the road this year. Plain and simple. Oklahoma just has not looked like the same team on the road this year. Outside of their trip to the Cotton Bowl, which is only half a road game technically, they just haven't looked the same. And so this is an opportunity for them to get that monkey off their back. This is an opportunity for Oklahoma to go on the road and take care of business, leave no doubt, and come back home to Norman for their season finale against TCU. And their struggles on the road have gone back to last year. And so this is something that I'm sure they've been told that all week long. I know that Brent Venables is a master motivator. He's excellent at that stuff. And, that'll be a big thing. But as far as the offense goes, I want to know how often they're going to feed Drake Stoops. I'm assuming that he's going to just continue to get looks his way in the passing game. And then I think this is also another game for Gavin Sawchuk to build on. You've really got to continue feeding him and seeing, he's still got plenty of tread left on those tires for this year. And I think that's going to be a strength of theirs going into, whether they have 2 games left on the year after this or 3 games left with a potential Big 12 championship. That rushing offense is going to be what helps you churn out those drives that help Dylan Gabriel finish them off. And so seeing Gavin Sawchuk really go in the running game is going to be good. And then defensively, we've seen some attrition in the back end. We've seen some guys go down. Gentry Williams, I don't know what his availability is going to be this weekend. Just considering how difficult that separating a shoulder can be to come back from, just as far as pain goes, I would imagine unless he is absolutely needed, they'll probably hold him out in this game. So it's another opportunity to see some young guys, get an opportunity to go in there. Is it Kenai Walker again? Do we see more Josiah Wagner? Do we see more Jacoby Johnson, who just had his first career interception? There's some things in the back end that really need to just continue to develop. The defensive line looked really good last week, so look for them to dominate. But, if I had to pick 2 things, it would be the secondary for Oklahoma defensively, and then offensively, it's the running game with Gavin Sawchuk.
I agree with you there, especially the running game. I mean, I think, like we talked about earlier, I think Gavin Sawchuk has done enough to warrant the bulk of the carries, even with as well as Tawi Walker has played at times this season. But I will be curious to see. I mean, they really, in the competitive portion against West Virginia, they didn't bother playing another running back.
No,
I mean, not really.
Who Gavin Sawchuk reminds me of at this point, and at just the way that he looks when he runs the football.
Who?
He's a faster version of Kennedy Brooks.
I can see that. Okay,
I mean,
yeah, like a
he
little
has
bit faster,
better top end speed, but he glides the same way, and his cutting ability at the line of scrimmage looks very similar to what we saw from Kennedy Brooks. And everybody obviously was really excited about him early on, and he ended up being, a damn good player for OU.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And also, I think I think Kennedy Brooks was, even though he wasn't the fastest guy, I think he was really good at reading blocks. He was really good at improvising, and he was just hard to bring down. And that's when Gavin Sawchuk's fully healthy, that dude's bigger than I think he gives credit for, or than he gets credit for.
Falling forward. Yep.
Yeah. He's hard to bring down. But I will be interested to see, again, is it like we expect? Does he continue to start and see the bulk of the carries? I'll add one other thing I'll be watching for is, you mentioned him earlier in the episode. I'll be watching Kip Lewis, a guy who, I think there was a question going into last weekend that with Danny Stutzman likely to come back, do they shift Danny Stutzman to middle linebacker and bring in Kip Lewis? Where does Jaren Kanak slide into all that? And the answer was they wanted Danny Stutzman and Kip Lewis to be on the defense. They both played over 50 snaps. Jaren Kanak really didn't play until the fourth quarter. And Brent Venables mentioned it after the game. Kip Lewis is a stud. He just sees the ball and goes and gets the ball. He keeps on making plays. I'll be curious to see if that continues, because Jaren Kanak played nearly every snap over the first 8 weeks. But he wasn't very good against Kansas, wasn't great against UCF, wasn't good against Oklahoma State. That opened the door for Kip Lewis. Does that continue? I'm assuming it does, but does that continue?
Do you have snap totals at your leisure right now? Is that something you can look at?
I don't.
I just was curious what Kanak's snap total was last week.
I think it was 25 or 26. Okay. And I think most of them I remember it being about half of Kip Lewis's total, and I remember most of them came in the fourth quarter.
Got it.
Like, I don't really think Kanak saw the field in the first half.
Okay. Well, it was just something to note. I thought would be interesting to know.
Yeah. And again, you mentioned Gentry Williams, that injury. Also, Dasan McCullough didn't play against West Virginia. He's dealing with some injuries. Peyton Bowen saw a lot of snaps against West Virginia after not playing that much the few games prior, because he's been dealing with injuries. So there are things to watch in that regard. And look, like you said, we can look at this on paper and say this is a game Oklahoma should win pretty easily on both sides of the ball. Oklahoma State probably thought the same thing going to UCF, and they got beat by 42. And if this team is, it's still funny to say it. And I was stunned looking I checked the score in the third quarter. I was like, what am I looking at?
They've got the teams wrong, right? No.
Yeah.
No, they didn't.
Man, but that's, again, an example. Oklahoma State, just like Oklahoma after the Texas win, after the UCF win, they were in the driver's seat. Now, all of a sudden, Oklahoma needs some things to go their way, but that doesn't matter if Oklahoma doesn't take care of business this Saturday. And I think this is a game where they should take care of business and look good doing it like they did against West Virginia. I think that's just where we're at. Bryan, any parting thoughts this weekend? Big 12 tiebreaker scenarios, anything like that?
Oklahoma fans need to keep an eye on the Iowa State-Texas game. We kind of mentioned that earlier. You need to be pulling really hard for Iowa State to pull off the win there. I will say, with Jonathan Brooks out for Texas, that's going to be a game that's a lot closer than people realize. That game is at 7 p.m. It's in Jack Trice Stadium. It's senior night. There's all kinds of things that happen up there in Ames at night. And so that's one that you definitely need to be paying attention to. But, as far as the Big 12 tiebreaker thing goes, like Brent Venables said, I don't really believe in conspiracy theories. You just need to take care of business. Get into 8-2, get to 8-2 and then worry about other things later. Or 9-2.
Yeah, 9-2. I'd also add Kansas State, Kansas. That's a huge game, and Kansas is this weekend, and that's another example. Again, a Kansas team that I think felt pretty good after beating Oklahoma, but last weekend they go down, or they beat Iowa State, and then they go down to Texas Tech because Jason Bean got hurt, and look, that's a tough thing, but that's how quickly things can change. Yeah. They lost to a middling Texas Tech team at home. And injuries hurt them, but you're right. And the other thing we didn't talk about is you're right. You just said it. OU moving to 9-2 on the year with a chance to go to 10-2. The optics haven't been great. Back-to-back losses hurt. But considering last year, And I mean, I think considering how tough those back-to-back losses were, I think to get to 9-2 with a chance to go to 10-2 with a spot in the Big 12 title game possibly up for grabs, a lot to be encouraged by, even if it's a little disappointing. Still a lot to be encouraged by.
This is just the opportunity for this team to actually go 12-2.
Humongous.
I mean, what more could you ask for in a transition year? So it's good stuff. It's Oklahoma's right where they need to be. I like where they're at. You just got to take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, Bryan, that will bring to an end this latest installment of the Oklahoma Drill, fueled by the Rivals Network and, of course, OU Insider. You guys can always find the latest episodes of the Oklahoma Drill with Bryan and I on our YouTube channel every Thursday, or you can go to wherever you get your podcasts to listen to us there. If you're not a VIP member over at OUinsider.com, go ahead and come over and check it out. It's a community full of thousands of OU fans. You'll get content from me, from Bryan, from our recruiting guys, Parker and Brandon. We've also got a new guy, Brody, who's handling a lot of basketball recruiting stuff. Because guess what? Basketball is underway. The men's team is 3-0. The women's team is 4-0. Both teams looking pretty good right now. And of course, we're still in the thick of college football and the OU football season. There's still a lot to unpack. You're not going to get the kind of content you can get over at OU Insider. Come over and check it out. And if not, Bryan, safe travels, particularly to you, but safe travels to you and I in Provo, Utah this weekend. And we'll see everybody else next week.